is different because we're measuring systolic and diastolic activity and so on. When she releases the sensor, her heartbeat goes to the first light bulb, and my heartbeat moves one position down to the next one. Now here comes my friend who drinks a lot of Red Bull. He's a raver. If you ever want to know what Red Bull does to your heart, boom, 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 boom. And then again, he pushes down one position, so now there's 3 people. Here comes the curator. Curator is freaked out. He's thinking we're going to electrocute people. So what happens inside the heart of a curator? Irene, are you here? No? Okay. Heartbeat of curator. Boom, 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 boom. So anyway, once 100 people participated, the entire room was filled with the vital signs of the past 100 participants. And once 101 participated, your own heartbeat would disappear from the room, kind of like a memento mori, just a reminder that we're here for a little time. And this project we've done, again, in many cities and in many different scales. For example, this is same idea, but using theatrical spotlights in Madison Square Park in New York City. So we had 200 spotlights in the perimeter of the oval lawn. And then as people participated, in this case, they would take over all the lights. You'll see it in a sec. So this fellow would hold on to them, and now he would take over the entire park, gradually, there. And then once he released the sensor, his heartbeat would go to the first spotlight, and everybody who was there before was pushed down one position. So at any given time, as you walked through the park, you would be bathed in the sun, in the light of all of those participants. And these pieces are passionately useless. There's no purpose for them other than, people again spending time in public space. So I was very happy that people would just sort of sit around and just be surrounded by the lights. And I'll just show you. So this kind of deal. That's what I'm looking for. I know it's not particularly heroic, but that's what I want. I want people to hang out. Okay, so here's the project that I'm most proud of. Not so much because of what I did, but because of the way that people use the project. Most of the artists that I admire, people like Johan Gertz or Hans Hakes or Rachel White-Reed, they make their best artworks when they're trying to memorialize, to think about remembering a very dark subject. So as a perfect example, Johan Gertz created the Hamburg Holocaust Memorial. And if you know about this piece, it's a very large black monolith that was in the center of the plaza. And over time, people scratched it and graffitied it, but over time it was designed to go into the earth, into the plaza. So if you go visit it now, there's nothing to see. You stand on top of the monolith, and there's just a plaque that says, this is what happened here. I get goosebumps just talking about that. So the disappearance of the slab is what will help us remember the atrocity. So that's an example of many of these anti-monuments that I'm very interested in. It's like, instead of these plaques, how can we activate the memory of something that happened? So the University UNAM invited me to memorialize the 40th anniversary of the Tlatelolco student massacre. In 1968, the Mexican government shot and killed, depending on who you ask, about 300 students, peaceful protesters, 10 days before the Olympics were to start. And the media did not report it and whatever. And so 40 years later, the site now belongs to the university, and they invited myself and other artists to remember what happened. So I was inspired by the Stridentista poets in Mexico. These were futurists or Dadaists that we had in Mexico in the 20s. They were poets. And these poets were nerds. They were the first usage of broadcast radio in Mexico was the poets who brought this technology to be able to amplify their messages to the general public. And in one of the poets, Javier Icaza talks, called Magna Voz, talks about this technology of amplification, this huge speaker that you could put in the Popocatépetl volcano and allow the poets and intellectuals of their time to speak to the people. So this idea of amplifying through technology our voice was the departing point for the project. So can you bring the volume up a little bit?
comentarios acerca de la represión que vivimos en este momento. Los mártires, todas aquellas personas que lucharon, que vieron por el futuro, pues muchas veces los dejamos en el olvido o solo recordamos la típica frase, el 2 de octubre no se olvida, mas no estamos
So the light hits the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. From the site of the massacre, the light hits the ministry.
Tanto a los jóvenes como a los adultos, a todos aquellos que les interesa su libertad y vivir en un país con democracia, pues que hagamos conciencia y no nos conformemos con lo que nos dan. Eso es todo. Gracias.
Fui partícipe en 1968 que desde la azotea de mi casa podía ver las ráfagas que desde aquí se emitían. Alcancé a oír todo el tiroteo. Sabíamos que algo grave pasaba aquí, pero rebasó lo que nosotros pensábamos.
Mi nombre es Marcos Sánchez García.
So over a period of a couple of weeks, every night at nightfall, people would speak onto this megaphone, unmoderated and uncensored. We got hundreds, maybe thousands of participants, everything from survivors of the massacre to neighbors, to students, to poets, and so on. The mic, it was incredibly moving. We had a fellow say, "My name's so-and-so, and I'm here to say I'm the son of one of the soldiers who committed the massacre. I've lived with this guilt all my life. I'm a new generation." We had a man who said, "My name's so-and-so, I'm a fireman, and I'm here to denounce that routinely the Mexican government asks us to put a coloring dye onto our water tanks, so when we spray the protesters they can easily be identified. And I became a fireman to protect people, not to be part of the apparatus of repression." Like that, non-stop. It was just so incredible, because the need for people to express themselves and for that voice to be seen and heard is, it was really necessary, still is. Now the project had one more element, which is, so you would speak, your voice would become flashes, the flashes would hit the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs we had 3 other lights, which would then signal your voice onto the rest of the city. Could be seen, these lights could be seen from a 10-mile radius. And when you were seeing these lights flash, at the same time we were converting their voices onto FM radio. So if you tune into 96.5 FM, radio now, you could listen live to what the voices were saying, what the lights were saying. And so that was really important, because the complicity of the media in not reporting what had happened was a big part of what we wanted to avoid. So the idea of the electromagnetic spectrum to be a part of the public space as well. Who has access to these radio technologies? And the answer is governments and corporations. So a civic takeover of those waves was, I think, in the spirit of what the Estridentistas would have liked. Crucially, because it was a radio program, when no one was participating, we would automatically play back archive recordings from survivors, from intellectuals of the time, people who were present. So, but we would always give priority to whoever was on the megaphone. And the key here is not to think about this as something that happened 40 or now almost 50 years ago, but as something that is still happening. So people would speak about contemporary massacres or contemporary situations of abuse of power, and they did. It was just really wonderful. So this is the kind of project that I'm extremely proud of, because I do think that people, through art, can express themselves, and that expression is really necessary. Let me just fast forward. Not everything was dark and sad. We also had marriage proposals, of course, and rappers and beatboxers and so on. Okay. Different project, world's largest spherical aerostat. We floated this in Melbourne in Federation Square, and we made a pretty faithful simulation of the activity at the surface of the sun. So this fake sun is exactly 100 million times smaller than the real thing. If you did that to the Earth, you would end up with a little marble. And the balloon floats there at night, and it's not a video, it's all equations, they're parameters things like reaction diffusion, Navier-Stokes, Berlin noise, and fractal flames. And so the different seasons, the sun has 11 seasons, they're all composed with these mathematics. And so let's fast forward, and because it's not a video, you could download an app and you could select the different seasons, and you could also seed. So as you caress the surface of your device, you see the equations. So you'll see my finger is actually that little dot that you see that is sort of changing the equations. I like the imagery of the sun as an example of the violence of light. So a lot of artists that I admire, people like Turrell or Irwin or any of these guys,